Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to MLA's Prime Lamb Profitability and Productivity webinar series. Tonight's webinar is titled Quantitative Prime Lamb Genetics, the formation of, the differences between, and the practical applications of ASBVs, plus a sheep genetics panel session at the end of the webinar. My name is David Brown, and I work with Holmes Sackett, who are the MLA webinar coordinators. Our presenter tonight is Clara Collison from Sheep Genetics, and at the end of the webinar we're lucky enough to have Andrew Swan and Daniel Brown from ASBV and Sheep Genetics to join us to help flesh out any questions that the audience may have about quantitative prime lamb genetics, the development of indexes, and all the intricacies involved in this space of prime lamb production. You'll have this webinar control panel on the right-hand side of your screen. I recommend hitting the red button to collapse that control panel. That way you'll be able to see the entire presentation. We can't hear you, but you should be able to hear us. Please tap a few one-liners into that questions box whenever you want. You're more than welcome to ask questions along the way. And at the end of the webinar, Clara and Swan and Daniel Brown will do their best to answer them in the same order that they come in. Tonight's presenter is Clara Collison. She's been working with Sheep Genetics since 2016. Clara studied Bachelor of Animal Science at UNE and then completed her honours in nitrate poisoning in sheep. Clara worked briefly at the Gingerleaf feedlot, beef cattle feedlot at Temora, and she's passionate about, since starting with Sheep Genetics, she's passionate about helping breeders understand the potential of quantitative genetics in their sheep flocks. So we're very lucky to be hearing from Clara tonight. We're also lucky to have with us Dr. Daniel Brown, who's one of the principal scientists at Sheep Genetics, and he's also involved with Animal Genetics and Breeding Unit, ASBV, at UNE. And we have Dr. Andrew Swan, who's one of the principal scientists at ASBV. And between Daniel and Andrew, they're heavily involved in the development of prime lamb breeding, ASBVs and indexes. And we really couldn't have a better lineup of people to help us through this subject this evening. So we're very lucky to have these people, and I'm looking forward very much from hearing from Clara and from having the three of them available to us at a unlimited Q&A session at the end of this webinar. So with that, I'll invite Clara to the conversation. Are you there, Clara?
Yes, I'm here, David.
Welcome to the webinar, and I will make you the presenter. You'll have a pop-up box there. Just click yes and take it from there.
Sorry.
That's all right, Clara.
Okay.
Perfect.
Firstly, thank you for having me, and I hope you find the webinar interesting, and we're happy to field plenty of questions at the end. So I'd just like to go through a quick agenda. Today I'm going to go through sheep genetics update, so just give you a bit of a quick overview of who we are and what we do. Then the second part of the webinar will be discussing our standard indexes and how some of these have been calculated. And then I will field that into looking at an eating quality example. So firstly, Sheep Genetics, we run the genetic evaluation services called LambPlan and Merino Select. And our role essentially is to provide tools to producers to help breed the sheep that they want to breed. So we look at take in lots of different information from different breed groups. And essentially our success at sheep genetics is measured by our rate of genetic improvement and the number of animals that we have in our analyses. So we have three large analyses. They're multi-breed, multi-trait, and world leading in the space because they're single-step analyses. We've got our maternal analyses. This includes animals that are self-replacing ewe flock type animals like Border Leicesters, composite maternals. We have our Merino analysis, so that includes Merinos from Australia and New Zealand. And then we have our terminal prime lamb analysis, so this includes breeds like Poll Dorsets, White Suffolks, Texels, and we have animals in that analysis from New Zealand and other countries around the world. So we have a small team of people at Sheep Genetics. Daniel Brown is our manager, and then we have our Merino Select staff. So Peter Bradley is our development officer, and Ermias is our database manager, and they run our Merino side of things in terms of extension and database. We have our lovely ladies in the office, Nicole and Fiona. They field any first-hand questions that come through, and also our finances and administration. And then there's myself and Stephen, who run and look after all of the land plan clients. And Stephen's in Dubbo, and not very many people get to see him. He taps away on the computer and does a really awesome job, but the computer is where he likes to stay. So if you ever get to see Stephen, you're pretty lucky. The other side of sheep genetics is basically the forefront. We do a lot of the extension work and the day-to-day runnings. However, there's a huge team of people who are working on R&D development behind the scenes, and they are ASBVs, so that's the Animal Genetics Breeding Unit. This is a joint venture between New South Wales Department of Primary Industries and the University of New England. ASBV has been around for 40 years and has been researching animal breeding in livestock for a very long time. And ASBV's essential role is they help run the analyses for sheep genetics, so they have the big computers that do the big churning of the data, and they're also our engine room for R&D. So we have lots of very clever people working behind the scenes, and we're very lucky to have one of those. Andrew Swan is going to help field some questions later on. He's a principal scientist at ASBV, and he's the index guru. So I thought I would also just give a little bit of background about where we're currently sitting. So this is demonstrating the Australian sheep flock in the green bars. We can see that over time we've had a huge decline in our numbers. However, the coloured lines are our main analyses, and so we've been able to maintain and continual improvement in those analyses and maintain our animal numbers over time. So more and more of the animals in the Australian flock are actually having data being recorded on them and coming into our system, which I think is a really good thing to see. So the next part of the webinar is discussing indexes and how they are calculated. So sheep genetics have a number of standard indexes that we produce for our maternal and terminal sheep breeders. Our maternal analyses, we have our three main indexes that are based around self-replacing composite animals. Our BLX index is targeted at Border Leicester breeders. Our MCP index is targeted at shedding maternal breeds like Dorpers. And our MCP plus is for Coopworth composite type animals. Then we have our terminal indexes. So these, we have our Carcass Plus index and our Lamb 2020 index. So they're carcass driven. But then we also have derivatives of those with our two new eating quality indexes that were implemented in 2016. So essentially, we have these indexes, but the purpose of them is for practical application, particularly for commercial producers. So one of the main points is, as a commercial producer, you should really focus on identifying the most appropriate index for you. And then once you've identified that index, it's a very useful tool to help rank animals. So if you're going to a sale and there's 100 animals in the catalogue, how do you limit that down to, you know, a small number of animals that you actually go to the sale prepared to look at and then be prepared to purchase? So it can be a really good tool that acts like a drafting gate to help narrow down, say, 100 animals down to 10 or 12 that you're going to the sale to actually have a look at and make sure that they're going to do the job for you. Then once you use that index, it's then really important to look at the ASBVs that are in the index, because we can have two animals that have the same index value, but their individual breeding values are actually quite different. So for combinations of reproduction and growth, for example, we can have animals that are really, really good for growth, which drives their index up, but they're not so great for reproduction. But we can also have animals that are really good for reproduction and only sitting around average for growth. So even though their index value is the same, they're made up for different reasons. The other thing that's really important is to look at other traits that may not necessarily be in the index. Worm egg count is a very good one. Not all indexes have worm egg count included, and for some people in certain environments it's really important to look at worm egg count. So they look at that on top of the index value that they've been looking at. But we also have a number of standard indexes that do include worm egg count in them. So the most important part about that is to make sure that you identify the most appropriate index for you, and you do that by matching your breeding objective on your commercial operation to the breeding objective that the index is based around. So essentially, when we're developing an index, we develop a breeding objective. So we take a typical commercial operation and we use that to define the traits of economic importance, and then we look at how that changing, what traits are going to have the biggest economic impact on that breeding objective. But then our selection index is actually how we combine the traits that we can measure and select for those traits to make the maximum progress towards our breeding objective. And one thing that a selection index does really well is it takes into consideration the heritability of a trait. So this is how much of the trait is expressed is due to genetics. And then we also look at the correlations between traits, and we can help balance that selection by looking at the relationships between those different traits. So the first thing we have to do is determine the economic model of that breeding objective. And the way we do that is by looking at a standard profit equation for a commercial flock. So we look at what impacts profit, which is income and costs. So our income comes from things like our wool sales and our surplus lambs or our cull ewes. And then we also want to take into the cost side of the business, which includes feed, management such as labour costs and marketing. And those inputs that come into that to allow us to look at those is production values and product prices from different flocks. We can also do customised indexes. So this is when flocks have very different breeding objectives to the rest of industry. So most of those have a niche market or a niche production system. But often we find custom indexes, generally when they're developed, they fit or align very close to our standard indexes as well. So the next thing we have to do is make sure we have that information. So we collect information through surveys from our ram breeders based on their production system and the production system of the clients that they sell to. So we want to know things about their breeding flock and your commercial breeding flock. So we ask questions in relation to their conception percentages, their weaning percentages, their scanning percentages. And then the next thing we think about is their sale. So what's the sale weight of the animals? What's the sale price of the animals? And then further down the supply chain, we're thinking about the carcass traits of the animals. So what's the carcass weight of those animals? What's the average carcass price that they've been receiving? And then we're also interested in other ways that they're making money. So for maternal and merino production system, it's about their wool price as well. So we think about wool price as well as kilos of clean fleece weight. But then the other thing that was part of that profit equation was the costs. So the other questions that we ask is about limited feed period, stocking rate, and the other big thing we've been asking about is ewe size, so how we manage our females' size of our ewes. So then we take all of that information and we use that in our model. So this is an example of our BLX index, which is our Border Leicester index. And essentially we model that this is what our typical production system would look like. So for what we've got here is we've got Border Leicestersires are being mated to Merino ewes. So we assume that the male offspring are sold and we keep the F1 females. And then we've made different assumptions based on the data we've been supplied about weaning weight, limited feed period, carcass price. So we can already see that we're getting 3 major production areas being covered here. We're looking at our growth and carcass of our animals, we're looking at our nutrition, and then we're also taking into account wool price as well. So now that we've got our typical commercial flock, the next thing that we want to do is look at the current profit level. So we develop that off that a typical commercial flock that we just talked about, and then to work out how economically important traits are, we independently change each trait. So we've got our flock mean, our profit level of our current flock, and then we change one trait by 1 unit, and then we recalculate the profit. Once we recalculate the profit, the economic value is the difference between our current flock level and then how we change that trait for 1 unit. So I've got an example at the bottom here, an economic value for post-weaning weight of $2. So what that means is an increase of 1 kilogram of post-weaning weight gave us an extra $2 of profit per ewe per year. Then what we want to do is demonstrate that in a way so we can understand what traits are contributing to profit and what response we would expect in our flock. So the way we demonstrate that is we have a graph that we produce for each of our indexes, and essentially we apply a weighting to each one of those traits, and then we can work out the predicted response we would expect over a 10-year period. So here in BLX we can see that post-weaning weight still has the biggest contribution to profit, and over a 10-year period we would expect a 2.8 kilogram increase in post-weaning weight. And it goes down through each of the traits and how they make up the index. So one of the key points here is for our maternal indexes, we actually have adult weight is restricted to be maintained at a response of 0 over time. So we, in our survey, we had a lot of breeders that come back to us and said that they didn't want their ewe size to get any bigger, and so we put extra emphasis on that particular trait to make sure that our response over a 10-year period was 0. So the next part of the presentation is looking at an eating quality example. And so firstly, I just wanted to demonstrate that now that we have a single step analysis, we're able to calculate trends for eating quality over time. So we can see here the blue line is carcass weight. As an industry, we've been making significant progress in carcass weight. And also in the red is lean meat yield. We've also been driving our lean meat yield forward by making really good progress in selection for growth, carcass weight and yield. But unfortunately, that has come at the detriment of our eating quality traits. So the yellow line at the bottom, that's intramuscular fat, we can see that that value is on a downward trend. We can also see that shear force is in an upward trend, and both of these are in an undesirable direction. And this is due to their negative correlation with lean meat yield and carcass weight. So we've developed eating quality indexes to help quantify and make sure that we're selecting our animals and balancing that relationship between lean meat yield and eating quality. But how do we value these traits? So the sheep CRC have performed consumer eating quality tests and used that on our information nucleus flocks. And essentially they had a number of animals that went through an eating quality trial, and they had consumers eat those pieces of lamb. They then score that lamb based on a scale of 0 to 100 for the 4 main traits, which are tenderness, juiciness, flavour and overall liking. And then we can convert that into an MSA grade or quality score. And then the second part of the survey is to ask, okay, if it is of this score, what is the value you are prepared to pay, or what are you willing to pay for that quality of meat? So essentially, from that data, we know that there is a large animal variation in eating quality. So on the left-hand side here, we can see our distribution goes from some ungrades, majority are a 3-star, some are a 4-star, and a couple are 5-star. So what is the value of actually improving eating quality by a score? If we push over here on the right side, if we push our distribution further over so we have more animals going from a 3-star to a 4-star, we're increasing our MSA grade, and essentially we're increasing the value of our product. So the economic model or value of improved eating quality, essentially we can say from the consumer data that has been collected, we want to have less ungrade meat and more animals grading in a 4 or a 5-star. And from that, we know that consumers will pay 50% less if a product falls into an ungrade component, but they will pay 50% more for a 4-star product, and they'll pay double the amount for a 5-star product. So essentially, we were able to work out that an increase of 1 score, equates to 15 cents a kilo in carcass price, and essentially we could equate that to be an economic value of an increase of $3.21 per ewe per year. So we have a number of economic values that go into our eating quality indexes. So we can see here that sale weight equates to an extra $1.83, lean meat yield $1.88, but certainly the biggest by far is that eating quality score. So by increasing our quality of our product by 1 star, we're increasing our profit by $3.21. So what is the difference between balancing our lean meat yield and our eating quality? So just to explain this graph a little bit, the blue line that's running across the top here, this is the maximum potential we can possibly make with the animals that we have available. Our blue line that's heading this way that says C+, this is our current carcass plus index. So we can see here that this index is making quite a good amount of progress in lean meat yield, but it is making negative impact on eating quality. This blue line here demonstrates that if we were only to select on the one trait, lean meat yield, we would make significant gains in lean meat yield, but we'd make significant decrease in our eating quality. Our current eating quality index is this one here. So this is includes lean meat yield and eating quality traits, and we can see that we're making a similar progress in lean meat yield, but we're also not decreasing our current quality level, which is a really good thing. This one over here, this is what we would call an eating quality or an economic index with an extra desired gains value put on top of that. So this is saying, okay, we want to put extra pressure on intramuscular fat in that index, and essentially we would make significant progress in our eating quality traits, but we would not make any progress or minimal progress in lean meat yield. So this index here is the current one that we use because it's a balance between increasing growth, which is still a profit driver for all businesses, but also making sure that we maintain our current level of quality. So that brings us to the difference between a desired gains and a relative economic value index. So a desired gains index is essentially just a combination of traits. So for example, if our goal was to increase our growth by 1 kilo over 10 years, we would put a huge proportion of our pressure on increasing growth. For example, Carcass Plus is a desired gains index, and essentially it's made up of 65% emphasis on growth, 35% emphasis on muscle, and 5% emphasis on decreasing fat. For the other example there is, for example, if we had fleece weight, we could say our goal is to increase fleece weight by 5%, but we want to maintain our current level of fibre diameter, so we would put a large proportion of our emphasis on fleece weight and a small proportion on fibre diameter. With a relative economic value index, it indicates the value of an animal towards a breeding objective. So if we increase a trait by 1 unit, what is our increase in profit? And then what makes the most profit has the biggest contribution to that index. So as I said before, is we can actually have indexes where we have a combination of both. So our maternal indexes were developed using relative economic values through Sheep Object, which is the program that helps manage all that information. And then because from survey answers, our producers, our breeders told us that they wanted to maintain adult weight, we then went and put extra pressure on adult weight because we wanted to have a desired response coming out the other end. So we maintained our adult weight at a level of 0. So I guess for the take-home messages that I have for the webinar today is that a commercial producer has 3 maternal and 4 terminal indexes to select from. But it's really important that you make sure you select the index that best suits your production system and your environment that you're running in. So this, we have multiple pages, information sheets on our website that are accessible by commercial producers, and you can go on there and find the descriptions for each of our standard indexes, and they'll all be presented in that same format that you saw in the graph before. Also, the other take-home message is that ensure that your ram breeder is breeding towards the index that you're interested in or what's going to make you the most money. This also involves making sure that the breeder is measuring the traits that are in the index. So the most amount of genetic progress is going to come from measuring those traits that make up that index, so we can identify animals that are going to be curve benders or animals that are going to be most productive for all those different traits combined together. If you don't know these things, I encourage you to ask your ram breeder. Most of them have a good relationship with us and know where to find the information, so they can help you find the information, and some of them will also be able to help explain what the index means if you need. But also it gives you an open relationship with that ram breeder to understand where they're breeding towards and what they're measuring in their flock. And so certainly if you're looking for further information on indexes or anything to do with sheep genetics, certainly give us a call and the lovely team will help you out. If not, visit our website and you hopefully will be able to find the information you need from there. So thank you.
Thanks, Clara. That was really good. A very well presented and comprehensive yet concise webinar. So thank you very much for that. I'll give you a minute or two's break there before we launch into question time. Look, everyone, I appreciate that some people will need to head off for this evening. I recommend you stick around because we do have Andrew Swan and Daniel Brown to contribute to the conversation tonight, along with Clara. So I encourage you to start banging some questions into the questions box. It's a really good opportunity to flesh out some of the detail involved in this quantitative prime lamb genetics. And it's not often you have a this amount of expertise at your disposal. So I really encourage you to get on board there. Next week, very exciting, we have a research update from Amy Lockwood of Murdoch University in Perth, Western Australia. She's just completed a large analysis on a national project looking at the influence of stocking rate and ewe mob size on prime lamb mortality, prime lamb flock lamb mortality. So Amy Lockwood's going to be stepping us through what the results of that national project were. I believe that there's been over 60 flocks evaluated in a range of different environments. So very excited to see what the outcomes of that, because I think to date a lot of the information around the influence of ewe mob size and stocking rate on lamb survival has been quite anecdotal, and it's been up to the producers to make probably unassisted decisions around how they manage that aspect of their lambing news. Don't forget that after the webinar there is a survey that'll pop up on your screen where every week we take notice of that. I go through it, address any of the key issues. We pull out any recommendations that we can use in future webinars. We deliver it to the presenters, obviously without contact details for privacy reasons, but we also provide the detail or the feedback to MLA to help drive their future decision making around extension projects, and we do rely on that quite a lot. So there's a few questions coming through, and thank you very much for those who are contributing here. Just give us a minute and we'll get that up and going. How are you going there, Clara? You're back online?
Yes, I'm good, and I've got Andrew Swan with me as well.
Oh, great.
Hi there.
Thanks, Andrew. How are you going?
I'm going well, thanks.
And Daniel Brown, are you online there?
Yes, I am.
Good evening, Daniel. How are you?
Yeah, all good, thank you.
Oh, excellent. So we've got a fair few questions coming through here, guys. Now, I'll mute those who are not speaking just to avoid any excessive feedback through the speakers. But and for those people who are asking the questions, I might just encourage you to, if you want to direct a question at a specific person, please nominate that person in your question. Otherwise, I'll try and nominate, I'll pick the right person to answer the question, or Clara might even be better suited to that. So here we go. Here's a question off the bat. This is from Paul. Paul wants to know, how does lean meat yield and eating quality relate to Merinos? Clara, I'll start with you. You may have an answer for that.
Is that to me, David?
Yes, Clara, or you can nominate one of the other guys if you wish.
Yeah, I'll pass it to Andrew.
I can have a go at that one, David. So the eating quality index is really targeted at terminals, and the reason for that was that terminals breeders have been selecting effectively for growth and lean meat yield since 1990 and made quite remarkable amounts of progress. But associated with that has been a reduction in eating quality. So that's where it's the biggest problem, really. In Merinos, it hasn't, and we certainly did see in the eating quality that if you look at the differences between breeds, and I don't really want to go into this in too much detail, but the Merinos, pure Merinos, do have a better eating quality than when you start to cross them with terminal breeds. It really is that selection history of the terminals that's kind of led to the problem that we're trying to address here. So not so big an issue in the Merinos.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you, Andrew. That's spot on. Another question coming through here. This is from Rodney. Rodney asks, this is probably another question for you, Andrew. Rodney asks, how is the economic value of EMD, I suspect that's post-weaning eye muscle depth, determined?
Yeah, so I think that was, you saw on the BLX, Clara put up a slide about forming the index for the inputs for BLX, and that says that we base the economic value for eye muscle on a carcass premium of 20 cents per millimetre. So, you know, you could argue about whether people are getting paid that or not. It's kind of just put in there to like that to produce a positive change in eye muscle. And in that sense, you know, although it's an economic input, it's kind of a little bit like a desired gains approach as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Andrew, and I suspect that would be that there'll be in a similar case that's the same for the eating quality.
Yeah, so yeah, the eating quality example is definitely a case of that people are not being paid for that at the moment. So, you know, on one of the slides we had there, it said, you know, the economic value would be $3.21 a ewe if there was supply chain feedback.
Yeah, no.
So in that sense, the eating quality index is a strategic index, if you like, to address a problem that's been coming and you know, is here now. Or even though we don't have perfect markets, you know, we have no market signals coming back down the supply chain to producers.
Yeah, okay. That's a good explanation. Thank you for that, Andrew. Look, Daniel, I'm going to unmute you just in case you want to interject at any stage. I hope that's okay. I would hate for you to have something to contribute and be muted at the same time. It wouldn't work very well. There's a good question here from Ross. Ross asks, is the New Zealand SIL index based on the same genetic analysis as Land Plan, even though it has more of an economic rating value index?
I think Daniel should answer that one.
So I'm not sure that I can actually answer that very well. I'm not 100% across what SIL, when we're talking about the New Zealand Genetic Evaluation System, I'm not 100% sure how they develop their indexes. They are done differently, but I would say that they are done with the same underlying principles as what Clara and Andrew have just talked about. I think that the fundamental drivers and the way they're calculated are very similar, but they obviously have a different production system and might have a different set of breeding value traits, so they might look and feel a bit different, but generally when we've compared them, they line up quite similar. I don't know if that actually answers the question or not, but I probably don't understand the system to answer it much better.
No, that's fine, Daniel. Look, that's what the Kiwis do is we're not expected to be all across that, but appreciate you having a crack at the question all the same. Question here from Graham. This is a really good question. I know from conversations with other producers that there are This has always been at the forefront of their mind. A question from Graham is, are you looking to develop an ASBV for ewe energy value like the US Angus EPD for cow energy value? Daniel or Andrew, maybe?
Well, I can start if you like, and then maybe hand it on to Daniel. The difficulty with that for sheep in Australia is lack of data on feed efficiency. So that's the first thing that we would need. We would need a population, say a reference population, where we actually measure feed efficiency, and then we can and then develop a breeding value off that. So I think there's a little bit of work going on in that area, but I'm not really sure of the status of it. So at that point, Daniel may know more than me.
So I don't think I do, Andrew, but in my mind, it depends what you actually think your energy value is. I think that we are very, very important, conscious of the cost of running ewes and the cost of the expectation to produce various things like lambs, wool, and obviously to reproduce, etc. So we would like to make sure, from a sheep genetics perspective, that we account for all those things appropriately, and then also model them in our indexes so that we're making a sensible, balanced genetic improvement across all the things that are important. And I think Andrew's spot on. We don't have the data adequate to do some of those things at the moment, but we are conscious that we're trying to develop that as best we can, given those constraints.
Okay.
So what I could add here is, sorry, Daniel, if I cut over the top of you, but the indexes that we have all do include the cost of feed in them, but they have a basic assumption that that all animals, there's no variation between animals in the amount of feed that they eat for a given live weight or pregnancy status or wool production or whatever. So we do account for feed costs in the indexes, but not the variation between animals in feed efficiency.
Yeah, so Andrew, if I was just to flesh that out a whisker more, so what you're saying is that as adult weight increases, you will increase the amount of energy she consumes during her maintenance period, but you don't adjust for actual feed efficiency.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so typically the economic value for adult weight is actually negative. So it's has a negative impact on profit, increasing adult weight, and that's because of the feed is the major cost on the breeding ewe.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. Okay.
It tends to actually genetically it tends to increase though, because it's highly associated with early growth rate, which you want to increase, and it's also associated genetically with better reproduction. So, the typical outcome, if you don't put a ceiling on adult weight, like we have in the new maternal indexes, is that it will actually increase in spite of its negative economic value.
Yeah, rightio. Okay. So that means that the benefits of the increased early growth and increased fertility actually outweigh the increased or the cost of increased ewe weight.
Yeah, that's right. So it's a mix of the actual dollar economic values that are in the breeding objective and the genetic correlations between traits that determine the outcome of the direction of genetic progress in each trait. And the index is the that represents the economic optimal way to achieve the objective.
Okay. So there's some excellent questions coming through here. This question was always going to come up. We may have dealt with it to some extent, but Nicholas asks, how will the producer be rewarded for better eating quality? Clara?
Yeah, so Daniel might be able to follow me up here, but certainly when we get more signals coming through the production supply chain, we'll be able to value eating quality on a cuts basis, and that's using a MSA model. So there's a lot of work going on at the moment to develop a value-based cuts model for lamb in MSA, but one of our current restrictions is being able to measure things like lean meat yield and IMF at chain speed in an abattoir. But certainly there is definitely ways where value can be returned. So at the moment, grids in lamb are also based on hot carcass weight and fat score, and most of them are quite open, so from 18 to 36 kilos. I certainly think moving forward that when those grids tighten up and become closer to being MSA through that MSA cuts-based model, we'll certainly see premiums or coming through the system to value eating quality. One of the other things I think is important to consider is the discount of if you don't actually meet those eating quality requirements. So we could see that in that graph there was a proportion of animals that fell into an ungrade, and we've also seen in other countries where a significant decline in quality has actually caused lack of market share later down the track. So I think it's really important to not only think of eating quality as a premium point of view that we may, once we have technology in place, that we get a payment for it, but also to make sure that we're not declining our quality of our product, that we then lose market share. So I think that's one really important thing to consider.
Thanks, Clara. That's very good. Thank you very much. Look, there's plenty of questions coming through here, guys. I'll keep on. Steve asks, how heritable is twinning without using the Border gene, e.g. selecting twin-born ewe lambs, then mating to a twin-born sire? I'm not sure who'd be best to answer that. Clara, you might be able to nominate someone.
He's jumping out of his seat.
Jumping out of my seat, Daniel. No, well, the traits that we have currently for reproduction in our lamb plan analyses are number of lambs born and number of lambs weaned. So twinning is part of that, certainly. But we're about to go to bring in some new breeding values. There'll be research breeding values first. And they split those traits up into fertility, so conception rate, if you like, litter size, which would be like twinning, and then lamb survival or ewe rearing ability. So unfortunately, those traits have fairly low heritabilities. The litter size, twinning kind of rate 1, you can say that the heritability is say between 5 and 10%. Depends on the quality of the data too. In good quality data, it can get up to 10%, but what we typically see in our data is probably more like 5%. And conception rate is about the same, and lamb survival unfortunately is a little bit lower than that. So they are lowly heritable traits, but to counter that, there is actually plenty of variation between, like at the phenotypic level, which means that there's also will be large differences between breeding values. So if you go into the databases, I guess you would see, if you looked at the top performing animals for the current reproduction traits, number of lambs weaned, and you looked at the top performers, they would have quite high breeding values, and perhaps if you looked at the percentile table, you would see that there's a large amount of variation there.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Andrew. That's really good. Clara and Andrew, your microphone is just dipping in and out a little bit there. I'm not quite sure why, but just be aware of that. And maybe we just need to face the computer more, or just talk a bit closer to it. But otherwise, we got that there. Thank you. Question here from Paul. Paul asks, how can I increase IMF in his Merino sheep? I might pick on Daniel. Would you be able to answer this?
Yeah, sure. So we've talked a lot about terminal size and maternals, but the same breeding values are available in Merinos. So we produce breeding values for IMF in all breeds. So those breeding values currently come from mostly driven through measurements of IMF in our research populations, and also in some other reference flocks. So they are available to Merinos, and there's also correlations with on-farm traits such as growth rate, and also fat and eye muscle depth from ultrasound scanning. So they are available. Not all breeders choose to report them, and there's, I guess, generally less interest in Merinos because they're concentrating on other traits, but they are available, and there's some Merino breeders actively selecting for IMF and shear force, and that's eating quality in Merino. So most breeders have those available if you ask for them.
Perfect. Thank you, Daniel. That's really good. This next question here, I suspect, will be aimed at our index guru, Andrew Swan. Andrew, there's a question here from Felicity. Felicity asks, which indexes have a FEC, fecal egg count, included in them?
As far as these ones go, the maternal indexes, MCP plus has a small amount, and the new indexes are BLX, MCP, and MCP plus. There is also the old maternal dollar index, which we are about to update, and I think that will have WEC in it as well. So two of the four indexes that will be commonly available for maternals have it in there, and then on the terminal side, the LAM 2020 index has WEC, and the LAM EQ, the LEQ index, has eating quality plus WEC.
Thank you for that, Andrew. Thank you. A good question here. Clara, you may have to nominate one of the lads or yourself. Kim asks, is the genetic data D&E data at all? I think that's the just.
Can you just repeat that for a second?
Yeah, Kim asks, is the genetic data DNA data? I think they might be asking whether, it's DNA coding maybe has been used to contribute to the ASBVs.
I might get Daniel to answer that one.
Sure. So our genetic evaluation, like Clara mentioned, is now what we call single step. So that means we're basically using all the on-farm pedigree data and performance data along with any genomic information that we've got. So we've got quite a lot of animals that are now genotyped in industry flocks. So we use that information and use that to improve our knowledge of the relationship between animals, and also to other animals that have been genotyped and phenotyped for key traits. In our research populations or our reference population, such as the sheep CRC, information nucleus, and animal resource tracks. So that means that we can take a genomic test on younger animals and get more accurate predictions for a range of breeding values because we're using that genomic information implicitly in our analysis now. And it's very important that some of those traits we can't measure on farm, for example, eating quality that Clara has just been talking about, is a good example of where we can use genomics to get better predictions for eating quality early in life on animals that we're going to use in our breeding program. So that is a significant outcome for industry to be able to use that information now.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Daniel. That's awesome. Look, I think there's a bit of a question here that's looking to determine the differences in breeds. Now, it may not be a question we can answer, but I'll throw it out there. Every question gets its chance in their webinars. Does the meat quality genes in the texels trump the meat quality index scores in terminal suffix? Clara?
Yeah, so I suppose Daniel and Andrew can both back me up here, but we have a crossbreed, a cross-flock analysis. So essentially we can directly compare animals of different breeds. And from our information nucleus data that we've collected on eating quality, essentially we have different breeds aren't performing as a breed group better than other breeds. So essentially some of the best animals that we have for eating quality can be a Merino or a white Suffolk or a Texel, but then also some of the poorer performing animals can also be each of those three breeds. As Andrew mentioned before, the selection of terminal animals based on pushing growth has been to the detriment of eating quality. So most of those breeds perform a little bit worse than what a Merino would because they had selection pressure on other things like wool. But one thing that is important to consider is the sire line of those animals. So there we can see significant differences between sires more than we see differences between breeds.
Yeah, that's great, Clara. I expected as such. So no real big differences between breeds, but a lot of differences within breeds. So very well answered. A comment here, more than a question, but I think a comment worth mentioning from Kate. Kate says, commercial producers want to understand the basics of ASBVs and how specific traits can be selected to suit their on-farm breeding objectives. Even though the indexes have been covered generally this evening, it is important for commercial producers to understand the basic concepts first. And I think that's a good message, Kate, for producers. You know, tonight's webinar has been probably leaning on the more advanced side of quantitative genetics and prime lambs. If people want to learn more in this space and they're not familiar with it, then they should start at the basics and work. So I'll back that comment up 100%. Question here from Justin. Why would any index be used that leaves genetics away from eating quality? We are breeding the sheep to eat. Justin, I think that's probably a comment as well. But maybe Daniel Brown would like to comment there. I think, in my mind, there's a reason why we have been leading them away from eating quality, but I'll let Daniel answer that.
Yeah, so it's a good question. I guess that there's a number of trains of thought in industry about how much importance to put on eating quality. Given the current situation with price signals, you know, producers are being paid based on basically lean meat yield. So that's a key profit driver, and at the moment people are not changing their focus, and that's will be to the detriment of eating quality long term. And I personally think that it's only a matter of time, like Clara was saying, till we've got price signals around MSA for lamb. It's not a matter of if, in my mind, it's just a matter of when, and I see that coming pretty soon myself. And that will change how we're paid for lambs. And I think there'll be a clear trend, like we see in beef, that there is a value for eating quality. And then when that comes, the breeders that have chose to breed for some sort of balanced strategy will be ahead of the game, and the people who have ignored inequality will be behind the game. So it's a commercial decision and a bit about how you predict the future. But we know that if we ignore inequality, it'll get worse and it'll affect our position in the global meat market. So I think it's important to have some sort of view of what the future is going to look like. And my view is that inequality will become important, more so like it has in beef.
Yeah, perfect, Daniel. Thank you. That's really good. Look, Paul asked a question earlier about how he can increase his IMF in merinos. Paul's come back with a second question. How do I measure his IMF or intramuscular fat in merinos? Now, Daniel, are you the man to answer that?
I'll have a go. So at the moment, we don't really have a direct live animal measurement. We have those correlated traits I mentioned before, which we know are related to IMF, but we don't actually have a way of selecting IMF in live animals except through genomic testing and ASBVs like we were talking about before. We're working hard. There's a large research program looking at better measurements for lean meat yield and eating quality, and that's including IMF. So we're working on, I can think of at least 6 different technologies at the moment trying to get better measures of IMF in supply chains. So that's an active area that we're working on, but at the moment we don't have a easy way to do that other than taking meat samples and doing lab tests of chemical IMF, which is what we do in our research population. So you can do it on slaughtered animals, but there's no live animal measurements at the moment. Even though we've been working hard to get that, we don't have one that we can use at the moment.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. That's perfect. Look, Clara, there's been a request from Richard here. Yeah, could you please just click back to one of your opening slides on the size of the Australian sheep flock and how many merinos, maternals and terminals are registered with sheep genetics? Are you able to do that? Thank you for that. That's great. A question from Ian. It's a long question, so just stick with us, David. In a self-replacing composite maternal flock, so in a self-replacing composite maternal flock that is producing new lambs to stock other properties, what would the presenters say to selecting those new lambs, twin or triplet born, which wean a lamb or lambs in their first year of life, and join them to a top 1% LMY or lean meat yield / EQ index ram from a top seed stock producer to produce flock rams for use in-house? Daniel, that may be a question for you again, is it?
I think Andrew's looked at this more. It might be actually more better if Andrew answers that, I think, but I'm happy to have a go if he's not comfortable.
Andrew?
I'm afraid I'm going to have to get you to repeat the question because I got a bit lost. No,
it's for sure. So Ian asked, in a self-replacing composite maternal flock that is producing new lambs to stock other properties, what would you say to selecting those ewe lambs who are twin or triplet born, which wean a lamb in their first year of life, and joining them to the top 1% of the lean meat yield eating quality index ram to produce flock rams? So I think the emphasis on that question is, if you selected ewe lambs that were born from twin or triplet litters, were able to raise a lamb in their first year of life, and then join them to a top ram, a top lean meat yield eating quality index ram to produce flock rams.
Yeah, I'm just struggling a bit with that one. I don't know. Do you have anything to say about that, Daniel?
Yeah, it's not an easy question to answer quickly. I think it would take a bit of modelling to work out what the actual commercial flock structure looked like and what traits were important. I I'm guessing that in a self-replacing composite, the balance of traits is slightly different to what we'd normally see in a crossing system. So obviously we need to breed ewes that are good for reproduction and wool growth, whatever else growth that we need to focus on. But then we obviously need to have the balance of eating quality for the slaughter stock. And I think I need to take that question more notice, and happy to provide more feedback when we've got time to understand the system better and provide better advice, I think.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. No, that's completely fine. I appreciate that. And Ian, what I recommend is if you want Clara to follow up on this question, I recommend being in touch with Sheep Genetics after this webinar, and she'll do what she can to make sure there's a meaningful answer to that question. Look, there's a good question.
Sure, that's it. Send us an email. Send us an email and we'll follow up with you.
Okay. Thanks for that, Daniel. There's a question here from John. John asks, John, you should have been part of the, by the looks of the question, it looks as though you should have been part of David Pethick's lamb eating quality update we held a few weeks ago. But that webinar should be available pretty soon, if not already, on the Making More from Sheep website, hosted by MLA. But look, we'll ask this question anyway. I think it's of a general opinion, a general interest topic. Hi team, it's a general meeting question. What are the panel's thoughts on the future of meat production versus synthetic proteins? They've been able to produce more protein equivalent from less grain for synthetic meats. I understand this is off topic if you don't want to answer it, but I suppose just a general opinion, starting with you, Daniel.
Sure, it's a good question, and obviously it's in the minds of lots of people in the meat industry at the moment. I think that I'm not educated well enough in that protein production system to really understand the pros and cons well enough to answer it. But I have heard a range of comments made in recent times about its value as a protein source. And I think that we need to know a lot more, but it's a threat we need to be aware of and make sure that we understand how big a threat it is and we're doing the best we can to produce a good natural protein in competition. But I don't really know any more than that, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Andrew, or Claire, would you like to contribute anything else, or is that your answer as well?
It is a really interesting question, and I don't know enough about it either, except that from what I understand, that synthetic meat is really specialised, really expensive at the moment. And of course, the good thing about meat production from ruminants is that it's grass-based, and so it's a way of utilising a resource there. Of course, you know, on the greenhouse gas side, ruminants produce a lot of that. So, you know, in the future, I suppose we could see lots of potential developments, but I don't really know what they are. But, you know, my opinion at the moment is that ruminant meat production is you know, an excellent way of utilising a grass resource.
Okay.
The important thing is in Australia we are in a good unique position where we have the integrity and clean green image of our product that is really important. So I think maintaining that image across the industry and to our overseas markets is really important as well. And I think one other thing is that synthetic meat is not just the only, I guess, threat that we need to be concerned about. Other protein sources are also going to be a challenge moving forward, which is why in the meat industry we have a real focus on the quality of our product, which is a particular focus in lamb at the moment, of being able to measure that in plant.
Okay, thanks, Clara. Clara, Clara, your speaker is playing up a little bit again. I don't know whether you can maybe shift back to the headset or something like that, because it's just becoming a little bit hard to hear Andrew and yourself. But look, another question here from Alan. Alan asks, are you looking to make an adjusted adult weaning weight breeding value to take conditions, adult weight breeding value to take condition score into account as well? I think this goes back to the efficiency question again, maybe. Daniel, your speakers is better at the moment, so I might head towards you if that's okay.
Sure. So condition score is obviously an important trait, and in recent times it's become of much more interest to breeders in general. So we're actively working on producing breeding values for condition score, so people can select more directly for adult condition. So we have looked at condition score and adult weight in ewes extensively over recent times, and they are related, and we have compared various ways of estimating those breeding values, and I think that like many traits, there's obviously a correlation between them, and we'll take them into account when we're estimating the breeding values. So the important concept in my mind, I guess, is what you want to select for. If we just take an adult weight, we'll probably be selecting and using that for a breeding value. We'll probably select for both mature size. If we wanted to increase adult weight, that is, naturally, if you used adult weight alone, you'd find animals that are not only bigger, they're heavier by default because of that correlation. So I think it'll be important for breeders to have a condition score breeding value, so they can select for animals that are not necessarily bigger, but have a better level of condition. So we'll take that into account in our breeding value when we estimate both those traits together.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. That's spot on, Daniel. A question here from Rodney. This is back onto the eating quality. With regard to eating quality, what is the relative value of intramuscular fat versus shear force? Is one trait more important than the other? Daniel?
That's a good question. So at the moment, our objective trait for our eating quality indexes is overall liking, which is basically from our lambs that have been put through sensory taste panels. That's essentially a combination of flavour, juiciness, tenderness, all add up into a general overall liking value. So we're actually actively trying to select for the overall eating quality of the meat, and we know that both shear force and IMF are correlated to those traits and each other. So the economic value as such is driven from eating quality, and we use those two other traits, the IMF and shear force, which we can measure to predict our eating quality of our animals. So we actually don't place an economic value on each of those traits, and they are both well correlated to eating quality. The difference is that IMF is more generally easily measured, or something we can measure more easily into the future, we think, than IMF in a supply chain. So that's, I think, one reason that IMF often gets talked about more than shear force, but both of them are important and correlated to each other and eating quality.
Great, thank you, Daniel. Well, question here. It's a similar vein on the efficiency, ewe efficiency. What about a ewe efficiency index? This is from Ross. Say a smaller ewe rearing multiple lambs as opposed to a large ewe weaning only one lamb. Maybe Clara would like to comment on that.
Can you hear me okay now, David?
Yeah, you're really clear now, Clara. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Can you just repeat that question?
Yeah, for sure. What about a feed efficiency index for ewes? Say selecting for smaller ewes, rearing multiple lambs as opposed to bigger ewes rearing only one lamb.
Yeah, so at the moment we have adult weight in our maternal indexes, and as Daniel was just talking about before, including a condition score, breeding value as well, so we can look at both of those things at the same time. But the other important part is that we do include, we have our number of lambs weaned or moving forward into our ewe rearing ability, breeding value. So it'll be about a combination of those three things, looking at the adult weight of the ewe, her condition score, and then the amount of lambs that she then goes on to raise. So it's really important that we have those three traits in combination together, and we can get a balance of those three things.
Yeah, spot on. Thanks, Clara. Okay.
The index would tend to select that way towards, you would end up with higher reproduction rates and probably increases in adult weight. They kind of go together.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Now there's two questions here from Ian. Ian asks, is feed efficiency? This is a good question. It's a simple one, but I think it's actually probably more to it than we think. Is feed efficiency linked to mature ewe weight? Yeah. Daniel or Andrew or Clara?
Yeah.
Efficiency can come at any given ewe weight, can't it? But is there a positive or a good positive relationship between feed efficiency and increasing ewe weight?
I would say that I don't know that we actually know the answer to that well in sheep. I think we've got a bit of information to suggest that in sheep, the ones that grow quicker, so growth rate is normally favourably correlated with efficiency. So they might eat more, but generally the net benefit is that they actually are more efficient. That's generally the way. I guess we don't have much adult weight data on animals that actually have feed intakes. We don't really know the answer from a genetics perspective. There'd be some work in beef cattle maybe, but the big problem with mature sheep is that it's very hard to measure grazing feed intakes. We don't really know. We don't have good estimates of actual grazing feed intake in mature animals in any species, is my guess, but I don't really know.
Yeah, it's a good question, Daniel, and thanks for having a crack at it. Yeah, I'm aware of a couple of producers who are having a look at feed efficiency in a lamb feedlot situation, and it'd be interesting seeing what their what some of the outputs are from their work. But anyway, that'd be another day. And Ian was concerned: is this talk of feed efficiency for ewes now a bit late, as we've been selecting for growth for the last 20 years? But I think you half answered that then, Daniel, and that growth could be actually positively or favourably related to feed efficiency as well.
I don't think it's actually less efficient to have large ewes. I mean, it is a difficult area, but we recently went to an international genetics conference, and one of the sessions I went to was all about this kind of thing, and there's a lot of work that goes on in dairy cows and people debating whether they want to have cows that actually eat more or less, and so the answers are not straightforward.
No, okay, great.
Sorry, Dave, I'm just going to add that in sheep, one of the biggest challenges for us is not about in relation to ewe size anyway. It's not necessarily about efficiency. It's about handling sheep and occupational health and safety and all those sort of things as well. So it is a bit more complicated for us in sheep, I think, but we're generally lacking good data to really answer the questions generally, I think.
Okay. It sounds like there's a message for any potential researchers or funding bodies out there by the sounds of this. But let's move on. There's a good question here from Steve. Is it possible that eating quality is affected by lamb's diet, maybe pasture versus feeding beans or grain? Are those nutritional variables able to influence eating quality? I'll start with Clara.
Yeah, so I'm sure Daniel might have to pop in here and help me out, but one of the things that definitely impacts intramuscular fat is also maturity of animals. So fat is a later deposition compared to muscle and bone. And so your nutritional intake is going to impact when fat is laid down. So that is part of that nutritional intake impacting intramuscular fat. But nutrition also has a heavy impact on external fat. So that's one of the challenges. In terms of what is actually fed, I'm not 100% sure on what's been done in that area. Can you answer that, Daniel?
So I do know of a couple of projects. I'm not 100% on the results, but my memory was when we've compared grain versus grass, the impact on eating quality was not very big from my memory. It was more about that maturity, age at slaughter type issue rather than what they were fed. I've got a feeling there was a difference in fat colour or something. I just can't remember exactly the details now, but I can provide those in more detail if we get an email I can follow up. I would also add that there's current research being done looking at new season lambs versus old season lambs, and they'll be put through sensory taste panels to assess some of those differences as well. So I think that is something that is actively being worked on, but there is some existing work which we can find out more details about after the webinar.
Great, thanks, Daniel. That's perfect. Question here. Now, this is another probing question from Brad in Bombala, and Brad's been participating in these webinars for a while now. So thanks for your input, Brad. It's always great, and I look forward to it. Brad asks, where do the panel believe the sweet spot for growth versus eating quality lies? Also, is the Carcass Plus Index under review as it continues to take us in a direction that the consumer feedback is telling us that they don't want? Andrew, maybe?
Yeah, the sweet spot is exactly what the index is designed to do, is to find that sweet spot. So, I mean, that's in a way a very simple answer. As far as Carcass Plus goes, yes, I think we should review it. That we do need to think about putting a moderate level of emphasis on eating quality in there. But that's something that we would consult with industry about before we actually made any change. But certainly I think it's a good idea that it should be reviewed.
Yeah, oh, great, Andrew. Thank you for that. No, great question, great answer. Thank you. Look, we're starting to get to the end of the questions, guys, so thanks for sticking with us. There's one more here from Neil. Neil asks, is there any estimates whether pre-birth feeding, is there any estimates whether pre-feeding birth manipulation has on future genetic potential on the performance of lambs or animals? Yeah, so the question is there any estimates on whether pre-birth feeding manipulation has any impact on future genetic potential on the performance of lambs or animals? I think the key word is genetic potential. So Daniel, would that be something you'd like to answer?
Yeah, I'm not sure I can answer it well. What I can say is that we know that how animals are fed pre-birth, so during gestation and even before joining, influences the performance of their subsequent progeny. So we take account for that in our breeding values, and we do know that for some traits that effect on the progeny lasts for a long time, and we can still detect that differences in their performance right out to adult for some traits. For example, we know the effects of birth type and rare type. So whether you're born and raised as a single or a twin, particularly the birth type effect, which is in utero, can last at adult for some of the fleece traits, as well as some of the growth traits. So I think that we do know it affects the phenotype of the progeny, and sometimes for a long time. But I don't know about the genetic potential bit. I don't think it should affect the genes. There might be some evidence that there's some effects on the genetic expression of animals, but I'm not really familiar with that to make any informed comment, I don't think.
Yeah. Thanks, Daniel.
The potential would be what we refer to as like epigenetic effects, which are just beyond the scope of what we want to talk about here tonight. But they are very interesting, and but we just don't have the capability to look for them within the the kind of data that we actually have.
No, that's fair enough, Andrew, and I'm familiar with that question. I think it's a good question, but I think it's well beyond the scope of tonight's webinar and probably what we're trying to do in sheep genetics. But definitely a good question. There's a question here from Robbie. Robbie asks, how heritable is weaning weight? If I'm keeping new lambs that weigh 45 kilograms plus at weaning and buying rams with good weaning weight ASBVs, will I eventually breed out the sheep that weigh less than 45 kilograms at weaning, resulting in being able to sell all my terminal lambs as trades, rather than having to sell the tail end as store lambs? Clara, would you like to answer that or nominate one of the guys?
Yeah, so the answer to that should be yes. Essentially, what we're trying to do in genetics is shift the mean of our population forward in the direction that we desire. So for weaning weight, we're wanting to move to heavier animals, and also animals that are going to dress more is probably the target. So particularly in a commercial production system, when you're turning off lambs, you want to make sure that they meet the specifications so that they're within fat ranges as well. So by selecting lambs, the top end of your lambs to breed from, and then selecting sires to bring into your flock that are within the top 1% for that breeding value, will certainly do that for you. But I think it is also really important to make sure that you're looking at other traits, not just weaning weight.
Great.
It would also depend on where you are at the moment, but on what your average is. But the sorts of genetic progress that we observe in our databases, it's easily achievable to make a change of, say, 4 kilos in 10 years. So that's what you can kind of look at it that way, relative to where you are at the moment.
Yeah.
And I would add to that, if it's weaning weight you're interested in, for example, one of the important effects is milk, the milking ability of the ewes. So we do have a maternal weaning weight breeding value, which is often not reported, but if you're selecting your own ewe replacements in a self-replacing type system, I think that you should be looking at maternal weaning weight as well to get an idea of the milking ability of the ewes. Also, I think we want to be conscious that if you're selecting your own replacements, you don't want to necessarily just be picking the early ones without knowing things like the joining interval. You don't want to be just picking the ones that were born earlier and out of mature ewes. So if you had some idea of what age group the animals come out of, and having a tight joining would actually improve your ability to pick the ones that are genetically the best replacements as well.
A question from me for Robbie, I suppose. Is there any sort of, say if Robbie is really serious on his ewe portion, is there any tools out there or resources available to start to have some sort of genetic profile of his ewe flock or maybe of individual ewes? Or is that overcomplicating it? Daniel?
I guess that yeah, it depends what breed. There is a thing that some people are using called the flock profile test, which is designed for Merinos to get an idea of the genetic merit for the key traits. But it depends on what breed of sheep you have. So I guess that if you've been buying rams that have ASBVs, you can already work out genetically how where your flock might sit by just tracking the ram team average. In terms of getting information on individual animals, you really need to have more information about pedigree and performance to do that well, and that is a whole different step compared to just having a commercial system where you're not reporting a lot of information. But I guess with preg scanning, we can get an idea of which animals might be early and late. So there might be tools around that you can help manage some of those environmental things that affect weaning weight and get better selection of those ewe replacements without going to ASBVs. Is, I guess, my obvious thought.
Yeah, right. Thanks, Daniel. And Robbie just wanted to quickly know, what do you call a tight lambing period? 4 or 5 or 6 weeks?
I think people often refer to 5 week being a good window, but that's obviously a commercial production system decision, and obviously highly variable depending on your environment and your sheep type and time of year and all those sort of things. But the bigger the window, the joining window, the more that opportunity there is for you to be picking the older animals that were just born earlier and look better compared to if there's a tighter joining.
Yeah, very cool. Look, last question, team, from Bruce. Bruce asks, if age increases fat deposition and potentially IMF, why then the apparent drop in eating quality at 2-tooth? So no doubt Bruce listened in to Dave Pethick's webinar the other day that highlighted that eating quality did drop off as the animal increased in age. But he asks here, well, if fat deposition increases and potentially intramuscular fat with age, then why does eating quality drop off as the animal gets older? Clara, do you have any contributions there?
Yeah, so one thing, as animals get older, there are other things that come into a play that affect eating quality, not just their fat level. So meat actually begins to become tougher as they get older due to change in composition of the meat fibers, and so fat's not the only contributor, I guess, is probably the biggest answer to that question. And also the other thing is, although increasing external fat is correlated to intramuscular fat, the correlation's not one. So we can also increase external fat but have with not a great improvement in IMF. Yeah.
Great. Well, that's a great answer to finish a good question for the evening. We are fresh out of questions, and sometimes webinars are not it could be almost seen as a thankless extension activity because you get so little feedback from the audience. But I can just tell you now that there's a few thank yous and a few well dones coming through on the message line here. So people really appreciate such a comprehensive presentation, and for Andrew and Daniel to stick around. So thank you very much to the sheep genetics team. Thank you very much for helping us pulling together such a great presentation, and for being on board tonight.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, David. Thanks all. It was good.
Great, awesome. Right, well done, guys. Thank you so much. Everybody else is saying good night, and look, make sure you participate in that survey at the end of the webinar. Don't forget that next week we have a ripping webinar with Amy Lockwood of Murdoch University, updating everyone on where the research outcomes are at from a national trial looking into the effect of mob size and stocking density on prime lamb survival. So that should be a good webinar to help us manage that part of the business. So again, thanks to the presenters and the panelists from Sheep Genetics and AGBU this evening, Clara, Daniel and Andrew. Thank you very much from MLA, and thank you very much for the participants for joining us tonight and supporting the webinars. So we're looking forward to seeing you next week. Have a good evening.